Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you to our program sponsor, Consumers Credit Union. Please visit consumerscu.org and learn a little bit more about consumers and ways that you might be able to connect with them. So, Brian, a lot has happened this week and last week. Let's talk taxes first. SBAM actually issued a call to action yesterday, which was our second call to action in just a week's time. So tell our viewers why we issued it and how it's going.
Well, we issued the call to action on both weeks up for the same issue. So there's a tax bill that is up for a vote, and embedded in the bill is a cancellation of small business relief, and then also earmarks for big business targeted tax incentives for big multinational companies. And so we opposed this last week. They ended up pulling it off the agenda. They actually didn't have session on Thursday as scheduled, and then came back this week with a revised proposal. But the proposal still canceled small business relief, and then also actually, I would say supercharged and between the budget and the tax bill, large corporate tax incentives. And so again, we've asked our membership to speak into this system, to stand up and be counted, to contact their representatives and senators and the governor, and let them know that there is an expectation that they not cancel the small business relief. And it's been have been very, very successful in both weeks. We've had well over 1,000 contacts into senators, representatives, and the governor, in sending the consistent message: don't cancel small business relief. This is due to small business. It's in current law, and it'll happen if they just don't take it away. And so this is an opportunity. Really, the way we think of it is, these political people, when they're running for office, they'll say that they're pro small business. They say things like small business is the backbone of the economy, and what we're looking for and what we're expecting now is that their voting record show that. And our members have really stepped up, and there's no question that it's made a difference. This is the sort of thing where I think the leadership in the legislature and the governor thought last week they were going to be able to kind of run this through without too much trouble. And here we are at the end of week 2, and they're getting close, but they're still having a hard time getting it over the finish line.
So last week they tried to cancel the income tax rollback for individuals and small businesses by backdating new earmarks for targeted corporate tax incentives. Is that still the problem this week?
So what they've done here in this bill is they added something new to it. It's this idea of a rebate. So our viewers have probably seen in the news over the last several days this idea of $180 rebate for tax filers. So if you have a joint return, they're saying, that you're usually like a married couple of a joint return, you get this rebate of $180. And if you're just an individual filer, you get a rebate of $180. That adds up to about $800 million. And what they're proposing to do now is they've added that in, and they're saying, well, the small business and individual rollback is now stopped by this rebate system. And let me back up from there. Because people say, well, what does that have to do with one? How does that stop it? The rollback that is due, the reduction in interest, or the reduction in the tax rate that is due to small businesses and to individuals, is because revenue grew very fast last year. And there's a mechanism in the law that says if revenues grow faster than inflation, and it's a lot faster than inflation, then this little tiny part goes back to reduce the rate that small businesses and individuals pay. And what state government is saying now is they don't want to let that happen. So the only way they can stop it is to either change the law overtly, which they don't want to do because that would make them look bad. So now what they're doing is saying, we're going to go back into the previous year and we're going to pass a law that says during the previous year that some of the tax revenue didn't go to the state's general fund. It went to these rebates. And so that's the crux of it, is they're kind of reconstructing last year's financials by changing the law and essentially making it look like tax revenue was lower than it actually was. And by doing that, they cancel small business relief. So the answer is that they're doing it differently this week, but it's the same outcome. They're canceling relief to small businesses and individuals. They're still earmarking money, the same, actually with the budget, a lot more money for the big corporate incentives, but they're technically using the rebate, the $180 rebate checks to de-trigger the tax decrease, to make it so that we know that taxpayers, us taxpayers, no longer qualify for the rollback. If that sounds confusing, that it was supposed to sound confusing. The idea is to make it, you got all this kind of stuff going on, all these accounting gimmicks and tricks, and they're doing that in order to make it look a certain way, and to really put to cloud or the actual impact, which is to remove tax relief from the system without having to take an overt vote in lowering the or eliminating the tax cut itself.
And so why is this even a question? Well, why would this even be a close vote?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sarah, because you would say, like, who would want to take tax relief away from individuals and small businesses when there's so much money, $9 billion on the table? And so it seems like this would just get torpedoed. Who would ever vote for this? Well, the people in charge now, they knew that. And so what they've done is they've taken some really popular things like tax relief for senior citizens, and they've put it in together with this. And so what they're saying to their representatives and the senators is that if you want to provide tax relief to senior citizens, in the same vote, you have to cancel the tax relief already due to small businesses and individuals, and you have to provide large corporations targeted tax incentives. And so they're putting them together, and so they're in quite a predicament. These representatives and senators are in quite a predicament where they're being told, if you vote against the big corporate incentives, and if you vote against cancellation of small business tax relief, then you're also voting against senior tax relief. It's the worst type of politics. It's the sort of thing, sometimes if people don't trust government, like, this is why. It's these types of things where they'll put things together, and they know they can't get one thing passed. They could never get it passed. So they put it together with something where people will be afraid to vote against it. And that's why it's a close vote. Otherwise it wouldn't be. These maneuvers of hiding the accounting, hiding the tax increase in an accounting maneuver, that was going to get found and it was going to get exposed. And if it was just that on its own, I have to believe that it wouldn't even come close to passing. But since they've put it together with senior citizen tax cuts, it's put people in a predicament where they're it's close. I think that this is within one vote of passage as we talk today.
And just before we started today's briefing, the House actually issued a call of the House. So what does that mean, and why are they doing that?
Yeah, call of the House. So this is a pretty dramatic impact. So the Speaker of the House this is not something that's happening in the Senate, but the Speaker of the House has the power to compel presence of the entire body. And so there's 110 members of the House of Representatives. And I think what they were concerned with, apparently, was that some of the members that were going to vote yes to cancel small business relief and fund the big corporate incentives, along with the senior citizen tax relief, they must have been afraid that they were going to lose some of those members, that they were done, right? They weren't going to stay all night. And so a call of the House is where they legally compel you, and they can use police force for this. That's the power of the speaker, to legally compel you to be present in the room. Literally, you have to be in the room of the House of Representatives. You are not allowed to leave. And as a state representative, that rule, the call of the House, was just imposed, I don't know, like 20 minutes ago or so. And that's a very dramatic step. That is normally not used, that particular method. Now, when I was in the House of Representatives back in the olden days, so it was 2007, call of the House was used many times. And you know what it was used for? An income tax increase, where at that time, the governor and the speaker really wanted to have an income tax increase. The people in the legislature did not support it, or at least not a majority of them. And so they tried to, they did a call of the House, and it went several days, sleeping under the desk, you know, that sort of thing. I remember one time I went to sleep at about 3 o'clock in the morning on the floor under my desk. And I was thinking, I thought this job would be more glamorous than this. But that's what they just imposed, the call of the House. And what it means is that they're playing hardball now. They're saying to these representatives, either you vote to cancel small business relief and fund corporate incentives, or you're not going to be allowed to leave. And I'm telling you, like, it might sound weird to people, like, what if they could just leave if they wanted? No, they can't. They can be compelled to stay there as long as this call of the House is in place. And the fact that they have to do it tells you something, doesn't it? Like, that they're taking steps this drastic. Not only are they issuing, though, a call of the House, they're also issuing what's called Rule Number 32. Usually, this is used for expediency's sake. Like, you got votes up on the board, and you want people to stay at your seat and vote. Rule 32 says you must stay in your seat. So not just in the room, but sitting down in your seat at your desk, and you must say that. Usually that's imposed when it's like, look, guys, we got a bunch of bills to pass today. We need everybody to stick to your seat, vote quick so that we can get through all the bills before the end of session. In this case, it's just another aspect or another level of lockdown. So you got to be in the room and you got to be in your seat. And it tells me that they're frustrated, and they're done negotiating, and now it's hardball. And so how this turns out, I think it's a good question. I can tell you back in 2007, it didn't work. It backfired on leadership back then. It made people dig in more, and it said, fine, if you're going to institute a call of the House, then not only I'm not going to support you on this, I'm not going to support the other stuff that's important to you. So it'll be interesting. This is a brand new crew. The fact that they're doing a call of the House, I think, shows that this policy that they're pursuing and this tactic of putting it together is something that is they shouldn't be doing. That it's not, that this isn't just the way the process would normally work. And in the face of a $9.2 billion surplus, the idea that, if they want to do the big corporate incentives, fine, do the big corporate incentives, but you don't have to take it away from small businesses. And so that's, I think, the place that's giving them a hard time. And we'll see. I mean, will these elected representatives, will they crack? Because they're forced to stay there. They can stay overnight. Back in 2007, when I was in the House and the speaker did a call of the House, we stayed there all night, over and over again. I mean, it was quite a fiasco for a few weeks. And but eventually they figured out that, look, I mean, people you can't bully them into voting like this. Whether this crew can be bullied into changing their vote or not, I guess we're about to find out.
So you mentioned the $9 billion surplus. So let's talk about that a little bit. With this type of surplus, $9 billion, why would they even feel the need to cancel the rollback in the first place?
Yeah, this was a part that was so puzzling until yesterday. So the governor proposed a budget yesterday, and after the budget, with all the spending priorities laid out in the budget, the surplus would be spent down. 8.9 of the 9.2 billion is would be spent. And so, in other words, there is a desire to spend all of that. I mean, I say spent, but part of it would be allocated to a rainy day fund or two different rainy day funds, about a billion, 1.1 billion of it. But the vast majority of it to be spent. And if they allow the small business tax cut to go into effect, then they can't spend as much. And there are a lot of really big spending increases that are shown in the budget. $79 billion total budget for the state of Michigan. It's a record. It's never been that high. It's a pretty big increase, even over last year, which was really big, and which was a record. Last year was a record, and the year before that was a record too. So, like, we've had a series of record high budgets, and a lot of it is that federal money coming in. And I am a little bit worried that they're setting spending expectations quite high, and therefore, when reality sets in future years, I think it's going to be it might be difficult for them. And so they're looking at it like, well, we better not give any more relief. Now that would be one thing if it was just that, Sarah. But here's the thing that I think is most difficult for us to process and for our membership to understand is, how can you say you can't afford it, but then turn around and say, but these massive targeted tax incentives for bigger businesses, for the biggest of businesses, the multinational billion-dollar corporations, that they can't afford that. We can't afford small business, but we can afford that. The earmark in the income tax bill is $500 million a year. So that's what they want every year to go toward these targeted tax incentives. For big businesses that only big businesses can qualify for. The small businesses literally cannot. There is no way that they can qualify for, and even if they wanted, but small businesses usually just want to be left alone. So, not looking for that type of handout. But but also, in addition to that, the budget put another $800 million into the fund that these corporate incentives are paid out of. And so they're proposing right now, they're asking for $1.3 billion for the large corporate tax incentives at the exact same time that they're saying they can't afford $650 million in individual and small business tax relief. Literally half. And so when we have this big response, our call to action got this big response, and I know some of them are in the governmental system are a little bit upset with us because we've our membership has reached out and they've had to deal with all these calls and emails and things. But it's just on its face, it's not reasonable. What they're doing is not right, and our members know it, and they're pushing back, and it's really an inspiration to see this. At the end of the day, they've got a lot of tools. They can make a lot of deals. They could put stack on other things, and just eventually they'll probably get enough people to pass and get what they want, because they've just got all the, they've got so many resources available to do it. But the fact that here we are 2 weeks later, and individuals and small businesses standing up, a David versus Goliath type thing, it's here we are. They're having to go to extraordinary lengths to get this passed, and that's the proof. That is the proof that it is bad policy. Good policy is not this hard to pass. And so I'm hopeful that people will stand their ground, and at the end of the day, the tax relief due to small businesses, it's modest. It's not asking that much. It's a rollback in the rate from 4.25 to 4.05. And I've heard people say, hey, why do you guys care so much about this? It's not that much. And so my answer back is, it's not that much to ask when you have an increase like you've had in government revenue, that a small amount goes back to roll back the rate that individuals and small businesses pay. Because those are the people that are paying for everything, right? They're the ones paying for sales tax and use tax and income tax and property taxes, everything that funds government. They're the ones that are always paying in. If the state has a windfall, which it has, inflation, for example, inflation creates a windfall of revenue to state government because everything costs more. That means their sales tax goes way through the roof. So individuals are paying so much more into the state. The idea of just a little bit of relief on the income tax rate is not much to ask. And so I'll turn it around and say, you know what, maybe, 0.2% of a rollback in the rate. They say it's not that much, so we don't need to give it. What I say is it's not that much to ask. And so they shouldn't be taking it away, and they especially shouldn't be taking it away in order to be able to turn around and pass it out to a select number of multinational corporations that have just better access and a bigger presence in the political system.
All right, so crystal ball, when do you foresee, the next steps happening here?
Well, this is going to be, I did not think that they would do a call of the House today. The fact that they did tells me that they are frustrated and they're ready to start throwing punches. So that's a new level of intimidation to kind of insert into the process, and the rank and file representatives are going to be under, and a lot of them are brand new. Remember, we just had an election in November. A lot of these people, and it had a huge turnover. More than half of the legislature had turned over. In the House, I think it was about half of the legislature turned over. And so these are brand new people, and how they respond to this level of pressure is a really, really good question. But that's a new dynamic and something that I was not anticipating happening today. But I think one way or another, this has to be resolved pretty soon. They have a process. It's called a conference committee. It's when the House and the Senate pass different things. If they can't agree, or they don't want to have process or amendments and representatives to be able to propose amendments, they can do what's called a conference committee. And that's where some like meeting of the House and the Senate versions come together. They do what's called a conference report. So it's essentially legislation, it's a bill, and it comes out of the conference committee. It goes to the House and Senate. And at that point, it cannot be amended in any way. Not all of the representatives are powerless to amend it at that point. They can just vote yes or no. That's it. And that's what's before them today, is just a straight up yes or no vote. If they can't get it through, and they need to make a change in order to get somebody to go switch from yes to no, then according to the rules in the legislature, and sometimes, the legislature, they could break their own rules, I suppose. But if you look at the joint rules that they all agreed to, the conference report, it has to get an up or down vote. And you can't send it back to committee for amendments unless it's been rejected by either the House or the Senate. And so that's, maybe at some point in the day, they're going to just let it get rejected and send it back to committee and try to amend it in a way that gains more support. And I don't have a good sense for how likely that is at this point, but I can say that they've got the conference committee, like they called it, and they put it in recess, which means that they're kind of, anticipating maybe that committee is going to catch a rejection and make an amendment and send it back to the House and Senate. But even that technically would be a violation of the rules. I believe that what the rules say, and Mason's legislative rules of order, is that that conference committee, once it's done and it passes a report, it is done. That if they can't reuse it, they have to start from scratch. And if the committee is rejected, appoint a new conference committee. And that's just policy and procedure, but that is what their own policy and procedure rules say should happen. But the fact that they convened the old conference committee tells me maybe they're planning on ignoring that rule. So a lot of unusual things are happening at the Capitol today.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the equity in the retiree exemptions. What progress has been made there?
So I've given you like all bad news, and so here I'm going to give you just a little nugget of good. The original iterations of the retiree exemptions played favorites. They treated people with pensions, especially public pensions, better than those with IRAs and 401ks. And for the most part, they've equalized those. And they apply an inflation to index to several years in a row from a base law back in 2007, I think, or a base number back then. And so the exemptions would be about almost $57,000 for an individual and about $113,000 for joint filers. And that would be the same no matter what type of retirement account that you have. So actually, that's good. We were hopeful that they would equalize those. We just wanted to make sure that small business owners who retire and their employees who retire get the same exemptions, the same treatment that those with pensions and public pensions have.
All right, so you referenced the $79 billion budget just a few minutes ago. That's a record high. The governor presented this yesterday. Can you give us some highlights about what we know so far in this budget?
Well, there's a lot in education, a lot of new stuff in education. And the foundation allowance has a big increase, so the amount that is paid per pupil. There are also some really big expansions on program line items. So things like the state provides lower income students with school lunch. There's a proposal in there to make that universal. Preschool is covered up to certain income levels, and so there's a proposal to make that universal across the board. Preschool. They even have in there some electric vehicle items, like for the state to help cover the cost of schools that want to buy electric buses. That was kind of out of the blue. So there's a lot of those types of things in there. The thing that really surprised me in the school aid budget this year was that of the new money, most of it went to just regular foundation allowance increase, which is the same, it's the same for every student in every district. And that surprised me a little bit because there has been a lot of movement lately in school education, finance issues and debates to move more toward recognizing like certain students are more expensive to educate. And so you got to fund it differently. You can't just assume every student costs the exact same amount to educate. So there have been steps in recent years toward, looking at, just equity formulas, and kids that are in high poverty, that very rural areas and very urban areas have high concentrations of poverty. And for different reasons, and they need different resources to kind of catch up and do better. And the state budget really didn't recognize that very much. I was surprised. I thought they might lean into that. Another one, special education or English language learners, that the proportion of the increase for those students that have the bigger challenges in front of them in terms of their educational achievement and their past educational performance really seemed to kind of take a back seat to the foundation allowance, where there was a very big and impressive increase proposed. There are some other things too. Probably we're running out of time here to get into, but the governor also proposed essentially a subsidy for purchase of electric vehicles, and basically it's the idea of a sales tax holiday, if you will, on the purchase of an electric vehicle. And then the proposal is for the general fund that takes away revenue that would otherwise have gone to the school aid fund. So the proposal is to have the general fund make that up. And so like a lot of that kind of stuff where it just kind of, like a brand new concept put into the system, not really an expansion of anything that currently exists, but a new thing.
And what about the dam roads? Any funding?
Well, no, the roads really did not get much attention at all. There was a couple $100 million that was like new proposed for fixing state and local bridges. And there's a lot of bridges that need repairs. $200 million. I mean, it sounds like a lot. I'm from this little town called Portland, Michigan. It's 200 million is like a lot of money to me still. But like in terms of building bridges, it doesn't go as far as you'd think. But the overall budget, really, that was one of the bigger surprises out of this budget. They did not propose to put surplus money into fixing roads. So there was that earmark for bridges that I just mentioned. But then the other thing was a big kind of new item in there is interest expense on the bonds from 2019. You might recall that SBAM, we are very, very favorable of increasing road funding and would even support gas taxes, registration fees. There's a lot of things that, where infrastructure is so important, and we support that. The only thing we don't support is borrowing money to fix the roads, because that puts us in a cycle where we can't get out of it. Where now that's coming home to roost. Interest rates have gone up. The state borrowed back in 2019, borrowed $3.5 billion. Interest rates have risen now, and the bond payments of that are starting to come due. And all the money will be gone and spent by the end of the next fiscal year. And we will be left with payments for the next 25 years. On $3.5 billion in bonds, we will pay $2.5 billion in interest. It's just not a good deal. And it created some more activity in the last couple of years. That activity will peter off when the money is gone in a few. And then we'll just be left with payments. So when we're paying our gas taxes and our registration fees, a portion of that is going to go to pay off these loans, and it won't go to fixing the current roads of that in that particular year. So I would say that while the education and budget had impressive increases in it, the Department of Transportation, the roads and infrastructure budget did not.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. We'll be back here Monday at 3 p.m. with the latest on small business issues. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody. See you on Monday.